My name is Phil, 32 years old, and after nearly a decade of grinding as a software developer, I finally saved enough to buy my first home. Nothing fancy, just a modest 3-bedroom in a nice neighborhood that needed some TLC. I was so proud to finally have something to show my family, so I planned the perfect housewarming BBQ and invited everyone. I spent days preparing, but when the big day came, not a single family member showed up. Meanwhile, my Instagram feed filled with photos of them all gathered around my sister Madison's new luxury SUV. That night, as my unused party lights glowed in the backyard, my phone suddenly exploded with desperate calls from my dad. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible to the people who should see you the most. I've always been the middle child caught between my older sister Madison and my younger brother Tyler. Madison was the star from day one homecoming. Queen valedictorian, perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect everything. She went to an Ivy League school on a partial scholarship, married a hedge fund manager named Bradford, and posts picture-perfect family photos with their 2 kids, Atticus and Penelope. Their house, in the expensive part of town, looks like something out of Architectural Digest. My dad never misses a chance to mention Madison's achievements at family gatherings. Tyler, my younger brother, is the athletic golden boy. 6'2" captain of the football team scholarship, offers from 5 different colleges. Dad never missed a single one of his games. Their bond was something I could only observe from a distance, never participate in. Tyler ended up at State University on a full athletic scholarship, and even though he's still finishing his degree, Dad already has a position waiting for him at his company. And then there's me, Phil, the forgettable middle child. I wasn't a star student like Madison or an athlete like Tyler. I was just average. I got decent grades, had a few friends, didn't cause trouble. I was the kind of kid teachers would struggle to remember at parent-teacher conferences. Phil. Oh yes, he's doing fine. My father Richard built his construction business from the ground up and has a very specific definition of success: big house, expensive car, impressive job title. He's a self-made man who worked his way up from nothing, and he expects his children to aim even higher. When I chose to study computer science instead of business, he shook his head and said, "There's no leadership in sitting behind a computer all day." That comment stung for years. My mother Eleanor is kind, but conflict-averse. She follows my father's lead in most family matters. If he's excited about something, she mirrors his enthusiasm. If he's dismissive, she reluctantly follows suit. I've seen her privately congratulate me on achievements, only to downplay them when my father enters the room. The pattern of being overlooked started early. When I made the honor roll in 9th grade, my parents nodded politely before immediately turning the conversation to Madison's college applications. When I graduated college, the first step toward my current career, the family celebration lasted all of 15 minutes before pivoting to Tyler's championship game that weekend. There was this one time about 5 years ago when I got promoted to senior developer. I called my parents to share the news, and my dad said, "That's nice, son," before immediately telling me about Madison's husband getting a new BMW. My achievement became a footnote in a conversation about someone else's material possessions. Even my love life suffered from my family's indifference. I dated Amber for nearly 2 years. She was smart, compassionate, and worked as a pediatric nurse. I thought she might be the one. But after attending a few family gatherings where she was largely ignored while Madison's husband was treated like royalty, she pulled me aside and said, "Phil, I care about you, but I don't think I'll ever truly be part of your family." We broke up a month later. That was 3 years ago, and I haven't had a serious relationship since. My career path wasn't glamorous, but I'm proud of it. I started in basic IT support, the guy who fixes printers and resets passwords. While working full-time, I took night classes to get additional certifications. Every promotion was earned through late nights and weekend work. From IT support to junior developer to senior developer, each step required sacrifices that nobody in my family saw or acknowledged. All the while I lived in a tiny studio apartment, 600 square feet of space that barely fit a bed desk and small kitchen table. I brown-bagged my lunch every day, limited eating out to once a month, and tracked every dollar in a spreadsheet. For 7 years, I put aside 30% of each paycheck toward a down payment. When friends went on vacations, I picked up extra freelance work. When they upgraded their cars, I kept driving my 15-year-old Honda with 200,000 miles on the odometer. The house hunting process was demoralizing at first. The real estate market had exploded, and my carefully saved down payment suddenly seemed inadequate. I looked at 37 houses over 6 months. I was outbid on 12 offers sometimes by buyers offering cash well above asking price. Each rejection felt like confirmation of what my family seemed to believe, that I wasn't quite good enough. Then I found a 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch house built in the 1980s. The kitchen needed updating, the deck had some rotting boards, and the landscaping was overgrown. But it had good bones, as my real estate agent Jessica kept saying. The backyard was spacious enough for entertaining, with mature trees providing shade. It was in a nice middle-class neighborhood with good schools. Not that I had kids, but I liked the stability that brought to a community. The day I signed the closing papers was surreal. Jessica, who had become something of a friend through the long house hunting process, brought me a small houseplant as a gift. "Every new home needs something living in it right away," she said. As I took the keys, I felt a swelling of pride that I rarely experienced. This was mine. I had done this on my own, without family connections or advantages. For once I had something tangible to show for my efforts, something that couldn't be dismissed or overlooked. I called my parents that night to share the news. "That's wonderful, Philip," my mother said, using my full name, as she always did when trying to sound enthusiastic. My father asked about square footage and property taxes, then mentioned that Madison and Bradford were thinking about buying a vacation home in the Hamptons. Even in my moment, I couldn't escape my sister's shadow. Still, I was determined to make this house a home, and hoped that perhaps finally my family might really see me when they visited. That's when I decided to throw a housewarming BBQ. I spent the next 3 weeks preparing my new home for the big reveal. Every evening after work and every weekend was dedicated to making the house presentable. I patched and painted every room, choosing a warm cream color for the living areas and a tranquil blue for the master bedroom. I replaced the rotting boards on the deck and power washed the entire structure before staining it a rich cedar tone. The overgrown landscaping required 4 straight Saturdays of work, cutting back bushes, removing dead plants, and putting in fresh mulch around the flower beds. During one of these yard work sessions, my next-door neighbor introduced himself. Marcus was about my age, a high school history teacher with a passion for woodworking. He noticed me struggling with a particularly stubborn tree stump and offered to help. We spent that Saturday afternoon working together, and afterward, he invited me over for a beer on his porch. "First home?" he asked, handing me a cold bottle. "That obvious, huh?" I laughed. "You've got that look, equal parts pride and terror," he said. "I was the same way 3 years ago." Marcus became my first friend in the neighborhood. He lent me tools I didn't have and offered advice on home maintenance. When I mentioned my planned housewarming BBQ, he immediately offered his extra folding tables and chairs. "Family coming in?" he asked. "My whole family," I confirmed with pride. "First time they'll all see the place." The next big decision was the grill. I spent hours researching models online, reading reviews, and comparing features. I finally settled on a mid-range gas grill with a side burner and enough cooking space to handle food for 15 people. It was more than I needed for just myself, but perfect for the family gathering I envisioned. When it was delivered, I spent an entire evening assembling it, then another hour seasoning the grates according to the manufacturer's instructions. Planning the menu was a labor of love. I wanted to showcase family favorites, while also demonstrating my own capabilities. The main course would be my father's famous brisket recipe that he guarded closely, but had finally shared with me a few years back, alongside grilled chicken for those who preferred lighter fare. Sides would include my mother's potato salad, grilled vegetables, baked beans, and corn on the cob. For dessert, I planned to make my grandmother's apple crisp recipe, a family tradition that always brought back warm memories of childhood summers. I created personalized invitations for each family member. Not digital invites or group texts, but actual cards with handwritten notes expressing how much their presence would mean to me. I mailed them 4 weeks in advance to ensure everyone had plenty of time to arrange their schedules. The responses came in gradually. My father called first. "Got your invitation, son. We'll be there." Your mother wants to know if she should bring her potato salad. That would be great, Dad, I replied, trying to contain my excitement, and I'm planning to make your brisket recipe. Good, good, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I'll bring a bottle of that bourbon you like. Housewarming gift. My sister Madison called next, her voice carrying that perpetual hint of distraction, as if she was simultaneously checking email while talking to me. Phil, we got your cute little invitation. Atticus has soccer that morning, but we should be able to make it after. Bradford's been wanting to check out that neighborhood anyway. He thinks it might be up and coming. I chose to focus on the fact that they were coming rather than the backhanded compliment about my up-and-coming neighborhood. Tyler texted his response, I'm in, bro. Want me to bring beer? Some of the guys from my old team might be in town cool if they swing by too. Even my extended family members confirmed Aunt Patricia and Uncle James, from my mother's side, my father's brother, Uncle Robert, and his wife Aunt Catherine. My cousin Stephanie, who I'd been close with as a child before her family moved to Oregon, said she happened to be in town that weekend and would love to come. I arranged the guest bedroom and office with air mattresses to accommodate family members coming from out of town. I purchased new towels for the bathroom, splurging on the thick hotel-quality kind. I even found old family photos to frame and place around the house, subtle reminders of our shared history. The night before the BBQ, I did a final deep clean of the house. I prepared the brisket, creating the dry rub and letting the meat absorb the flavors overnight in the refrigerator. I marinated chicken breasts in a blend of herbs and olive oil. I chopped vegetables for skewers and prepared as many side dishes as possible in advance. Despite my exhaustion, I barely slept that night. I kept imagining my family's reactions. When they saw the house, pictured my father nodding in approval at the solid construction, my mother admiring the kitchen, Madison perhaps feeling a twinge of surprise that her middle brother had created such a nice home. For once, I would be at the center of a family gathering rather than on the periphery. I woke up at 6 in the morning on BBQ day, despite having set my alarm for 7:30. The nervous energy wouldn't let me stay in bed. I started the coffee maker and went outside to check the weather. Perfect blue skies, 78 degrees forecast for the afternoon. I set up the yard games I'd purchased, cornhole and ladder ball, positioning them in the flat area of the backyard where there was plenty of room to play. At 9, I started the brisket on the grill, carefully following my father's instructions for maintaining the perfect low temperature. The meat would need several hours to reach that perfect tenderness. I set up the tables and chairs, arranging them under the shade of the large maple tree. I placed citronella candles strategically to ward off mosquitoes later in the evening. I filled coolers with ice ready for drinks. The invitation had specified a 1 o'clock start time. By noon, everything was ready. The house was immaculate, the food was coming along perfectly, and the backyard looked like something from a summer entertainment magazine. I showered and changed into a new button-down shirt I'd bought specifically for the occasion. At 12:45, I positioned myself on the front porch with a cold drink ready to welcome my guests as they arrived. 1 o'clock came and went. I wasn't concerned, family gatherings rarely started exactly on time. By 1:30, I was checking my phone, wondering if perhaps I'd gotten the date wrong. By 2, I started texting family members to confirm they were on their way. No responses. By 3 o'clock, 3 hours into what was supposed to be a lively family barbecue, I sat alone at a fully prepared party. The brisket was done and resting, covered in foil. The side dishes were ready. The drinks were cold. But there were no guests to enjoy any of it. As the clock hit 4 in the afternoon, the reality of the situation became impossible to ignore. No one was coming. I had called every family member multiple times, and each call went straight to voicemail. I left messages ranging from concerned, "Hey, just wondering if you're on your way," to worried, "Is everything okay? Please call me back," to finally defeated, "I guess something came up. The food's ready whenever you get here." The silence was deafening. The carefully arranged chairs sat empty. The yard games remained untouched. The brisket, which I had so carefully prepared, according to my father's exact specifications, was now cooling on the kitchen counter. All those hours of preparation, all that hope and excitement had led to this moment of crushing disappointment. I pulled out my phone again, but instead of making another futile call, I opened Instagram And there it was. The mystery solved in the most painful way possible. Madison had posted less than an hour ago. The location tag was her house, not mine. The photo showed my entire family gathered around a gleaming black SUV with a massive red bow on the hood. Madison was posing with the driver's door open, 1 foot inside the vehicle, beaming at the camera. The caption read, "Surprise, Bradford got me my dream car. For our anniversary blessed family celebration new car." I scrolled through more photos. There was my father raising a glass in a toast. My mother standing proudly next to Madison, her arm around her daughter's shoulders. There was Tyler sitting in the driver's seat giving a thumbs up. Even Aunt Patricia and Uncle James were there admiring the leather interior. Every single person who had RSVP'd to my BBQ was at Madison's house, instead celebrating her new luxury SUV. The comments made it worse. My father had written, "Nothing makes me prouder than seeing my children happy." My mother's comment, "Family time is the best time," Tyler had added. "Sweet ride, sis. Much better than my old clunker." I set my phone down and walked slowly around my empty backyard party. The perfectly arranged tables with their cheerful tablecloths. The carefully selected playlist still streaming quietly from the Bluetooth speakers. The banner I'd hung that read, "Welcome to Phil's new home," fluttered in the afternoon breeze, as if waving goodbye to my expectations. In that moment, I felt utterly invisible. Not just overlooked or underappreciated, but completely unseen. As if I could vanish from the face of the earth, and my family might not notice until they needed something from me. The realization wasn't new. I'd felt this way many times before, but never had it been so starkly demonstrated. I remembered my college graduation when my parents left early to make it to Tyler's regional baseball tournament. I remembered my 30th birthday 2 years ago, when my family's group chat was more focused on Madison's kitchen renovation than acknowledging my milestone. I remembered countless family dinners where I could barely get a word in edgewise between stories of Madison's accomplishments and Tyler's athletic feats. The sound of a car door closing snapped me out of my thoughts. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought perhaps someone had arrived after all, but it was Marcus from next door, carrying a 6-pack of craft beer. "Thought I'd come check out the party," he said cheerfully, then paused as he took in the empty backyard. His expression shifted from excitement to confusion. "Am I early?" "No," I said simply. "You're actually the only one who showed up." Marcus listened quietly as I explained the situation, showing him the Instagram posts. He didn't offer platitudes or try to make excuses for my family. He just nodded and said, "That's really tough, man. I'm sorry." "You don't have to stay," I told him. "Pretty pathetic party." "Are you kidding? I see a perfectly good brisket cold beer and excellent company," he replied. "Their loss is my gain." So Marcus became my only guest. We ate brisket, and sides drank beer, and talked about everything except my absent family. He told me about his students, his woodworking projects, his disastrous attempt at online dating. I showed him the house renovations I'd completed, and talked about my plans for the bathroom remodel. It wasn't the family gathering I'd planned, but there was something genuine about it that helped ease the sting of rejection. As the sun began to set, Marcus helped me pack up the leftover food enough to feed me for a week and take down the decorations. He declined taking any food home, insisting I'd need it more than him since I'd just moved in. "Thanks for salvaging this disaster," I told him as he headed home. "Neighbors look out for each other," he replied with a shrug. "Besides that, was the best brisket I've had in years." After he left, I sat alone on my new deck as darkness fell. I turned on the string lights I'd hung for the party, their warm glow illuminating the empty space. I couldn't bring myself to turn them off. Doing so felt like admitting final defeat. I considered calling my family to confront them, to ask how they could all stand me up without so much as a text message. But I decided against it. What would be the point? The evidence was clear. When forced to choose between my milestone and Madison's newest possession, they had made their choice unanimously. Instead, I turned my phone to silent mode and placed it face down on the table beside me. Whatever they had to say could wait until tomorrow. Tonight, I just needed to sit with my disappointment and anger to acknowledge it rather than push it down as I had so many times before. As the neighborhood grew quiet around me, I found myself wondering if I'd been foolish to expect anything different. Perhaps this was the natural order of things in my family, Madison and Tyler in the spotlight, Phil in the shadows. Perhaps it had always been this way, and always would be. With that melancholy thought, I finally turned off the party lights and went inside, leaving the dreams of family connection literally in the dark. I was settling in for a night of mindless television when a breaking news alert flashed across the screen around 10 o'clock. Flash flooding reported in eastern neighborhoods, announced the somber-faced reporter. Authorities are advising residents to seek higher ground immediately. The camera panned to show streets transformed into rushing rivers with water halfway up car doors. I recognized the area immediately. It was Madison's neighborhood. The expensive, exclusive part of town that happened to be in a low-lying area near the river. My first reaction was concern. Despite everything that had happened that day, these were still my family members. I grabbed my phone, turning off silent mode, to see multiple missed calls and texts that had come through while I was ignoring it. I tried calling my father first, but the call wouldn't connect. Same with my mother and Madison. The local news was reporting widespread power outages and cellular service disruptions in the affected areas. I checked the emergency services website, which showed the flooding was rapidly expanding beyond initial projections due to a dam upstream that was reaching critical levels. I turned back to the television, where they were now showing helicopter footage of the affected neighborhoods. The reporter explained that emergency services were overwhelmed with calls and were prioritizing life-threatening situations. Many residents were stranded in their homes as waters continued to rise. I felt a growing knot of anxiety in my stomach. My neighborhood, situated on higher ground, was completely unaffected. I had power, internet, everything working normally. Meanwhile, my entire family might be in serious danger. Part of me, a part I wasn't proud of, felt a grim satisfaction. After being completely forgotten by my family, on one of the most important days of my life, there was a certain poetic justice in them suddenly needing me. But that satisfaction quickly gave way to shame. These were people I loved regardless of how they'd treated me today. Still, I hesitated to reach out first. The hurt was too fresh, the evidence of their indifference too clear. I decided to wait and see if they would contact me. If they were truly in trouble, surely someone would think to call the family member whose house was on high ground. As I was debating what to do, my phone suddenly came to life. It was as if the cellular networks had momentarily stabilized because suddenly my phone was exploding with notifications. Multiple missed calls from my father. Voicemails. Text messages from everyone. I played the first voicemail from my father, timestamped at 9:15 p.m. Phil, it's Dad. Listen, we've got a situation here at Madison's. The streets are starting to flood, and they're saying it's going to get worse. Call me back. The next one, from 9:40. Phil, the water's rising fast. We're moving everything upstairs, but they're saying the power might go out soon. Madison's car got hit by a fallen tree branch. Call me as soon as you get this. And the most recent, from just 10 minutes ago, my father's voice now clearly stressed. Son, we need your help. The roads are completely flooded. We can't get out, and emergency services say it could be hours before they reach us. The water's coming up to the first floor now. We're all upstairs at Madison's. If you can find a way to get to us, please, Phil. We need you. I scrolled through the text messages. From my mother, Philip, please call us if you get this. We're very worried here. From Madison, Phil. I know you must be upset about today. I'm so sorry, but we're in trouble. Atticus and Penelope are scared. Can you help us? From Tyler, bro. It's bad here. Dad's trying not to show it, but he's freaking out. Do you think you could get through to us somehow? Messages from aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone who had ghosted my BBQ was now reaching out in desperation. I sat in my dry, safe living room, the television continuing to show the worsening flood conditions. According to the news, the areas most affected could remain flooded for days. Emergency shelters were being set up in schools and community centers on higher ground. I had a choice to make. I could ignore their pleas, give them a taste of being forgotten the way I had been. Or I could put aside my hurt feelings and do what families are supposed to do, be there for each other in times of crisis. The debate didn't last long. Regardless of how they had treated me, I couldn't leave them stranded, especially with young children involved. I called my father back, but the call dropped immediately. The networks were overwhelmed again. I sent a text instead, "I'm coming. Stay upstairs. Keep phones charged if possible. Might take time to find a route." Then I sprang into action. I gathered flashlights, batteries, first aid supplies, bottles of water, and non-perishable food items. I found every towel and blanket in the house and packed them into garbage bags to keep them dry. I changed into sturdy boots and a raincoat. But I knew my sedan wouldn't make it through flooded streets. I needed help, and there was only one person I could think to ask. I ran next door and knocked urgently on Marcus's door. He answered in sweatpants and a t-shirt, clearly ready for bed. "My family is stranded in the flood zone," I explained quickly. "Emergency services are backed up. I need to get to them, but my car won't make it through the water." Without hesitation, Marcus grabbed his keys. "I've got a pickup truck with high clearance. Let me throw on some boots." Within minutes, we were loading supplies into Marcus's truck. He had additional equipment I hadn't thought of. Rope, a small inflatable raft he used for fishing, and a hand-crank emergency radio. "We need to be smart about this," Marcus cautioned as we got in the truck. "Floodwaters are unpredictable. If it's too deep, we back out. No heroics." I nodded, grateful for his level-headed approach, and even more grateful for his willingness to help people he'd never even met. The drive was tense. Several main roads were already closed, with police barricades blocking access. We had to take a circuitous route, constantly checking the emergency management app on my phone for updates on which streets were still passable. As we got closer to Madison's neighborhood, the situation grew more dire. Streetlights were out, leaving only our headlights to illuminate the scene. Water covered the roads in some places, appearing deceptively shallow, in others visibly deep and fast-moving. Marcus drove carefully, testing each section before committing to it. Several times we had to back up and find another route when the water proved too deep. We passed abandoned cars, their headlights still on, but water up to their windows. After nearly an hour of careful navigation, we finally reached Madison Street. The water here was about 2 feet deep, manageable for Marcus's truck, but rising visibly. Her house was one of the largest on the block, a colonial-style 2-story with a circular driveway. The new SUV that had been the center of attention earlier was now partially submerged, the red gift bow floating sadly beside it. Water had reached the first-floor windows, and the only lights visible were flashlights moving in the second-floor rooms. We pulled as close as we safely could, then Marcus flashed his high beams several times. I saw curtains move upstairs as faces peered out. "We'll need to wade in," I said, grabbing supplies. "The water's too deep for the truck to get closer." Marcus nodded, reaching for the inflatable raft. "We can use this to float your supplies and get the kids and older folks back safely." We quickly inflated the raft and loaded it with our emergency supplies. Then, with water reaching mid-thigh, we carefully made our way toward the house. I called out as we approached. "Dad, Mom? We're here." The front door was underwater, so we had to go around to the back, where a second-story deck offered a way out. My father appeared on the deck, shining a flashlight down at us. "Phil," thank God, his voice cracked with emotion, something I'd rarely heard from my stoic father. "We brought a raft," I shouted up. "Is everyone okay?" "We're all here," he confirmed. "Water came up fast. Power's been out for hours." We positioned ourselves under the deck, and my father began helping family members climb carefully over the railing where Marcus and I could help them down into the raft. First came the children, Atticus, age 7, and Penelope, age 5, both wide-eyed with fear, but trying to be brave. My mother came next, then Aunt Patricia, who had a bad hip. Uncle James and Uncle Robert helped the others before coming down themselves. Madison was clearly in shock, clutching her designer handbag as if it were a life preserver. "My house," she kept saying. "Everything's ruined." Bradford, her husband, was surprisingly practical in the crisis, helping organize everyone, and carrying an elderly neighbor who had sought refuge with them. My father was the last to come down, pausing at the railing to look back at the house, where water continued to rise inside. "Dad, we need to go now," I urged. "The water's still rising." He nodded grimly, and made his way down to us. With everyone loaded into the raft and truck, a tight squeeze, but we made it work. Marcus navigated us carefully back through the flooded streets. The journey out was even more treacherous than the journey in with water levels rising and new obstacles appearing. In the crowded truck cab, with Atticus sitting on my lap and Penelope on my mother's, no one spoke much. The gravity of the situation and the relief of rescue kept conversation minimal. I could feel my father glancing at me periodically from the back seat, but I kept my eyes forward, focused on helping Marcus navigate. When we finally reached dry ground and could see emergency vehicles and a makeshift command center ahead, I heard my mother whisper, "Philip knew what to do. He saved us." After nearly 2 hours of careful driving, we finally reached my neighborhood, still completely dry and normal looking, a stark contrast to the disaster zone we'd left behind. As Marcus pulled into my driveway, I saw my family taking in my house for the first time. Their expressions a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and something else, surprise, perhaps at what I had created for myself. Everyone inside I directed unlocking the front door and turning on lights. There are dry clothes upstairs, bathrooms to the left and right, kitchen stocked. As they filed in, wet, tired, and subdued, I realized that this was not how I had imagined my family would first see my home, but they were seeing it now. And for once, I was the one they were turning to. As my family entered my home for the first time, I pushed aside my lingering hurt to focus on what needed to be done. This wasn't how I'd imagined showing them my house, but the crisis had created an unexpected opportunity. They needed me now, and they were seeing a side of me they'd rarely acknowledged. "Marcus and I will get the sleeping arrangements sorted," I announced, taking charge naturally. "Mom, Dad, you can take the guest room. Madison and Bradford, you and the kids can have my room. Tyler, you're on the air mattress in the office. Aunt Patricia and Uncle James, there's a pull-out sofa in the living room. Uncle Robert and Aunt Catherine, I have another air mattress for the den." No one argued with my directions, a first in family memory. My father, usually the unquestioned authority, simply nodded and followed my lead. "Thank you, Phil," my mother said softly, clutching a towel I'd handed her. "I don't know what we would have done if..." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. If I hadn't come, if I had ignored their calls the way they had ignored mine. Marcus helped me set up the air mattresses, while family members took turns showering and changing into the assortment of clothes I'd gathered, sweatpants, t-shirts, whatever I could find that might fit. It was strange seeing my fashion-conscious sister Madison in my old college sweatshirt, or my father usually impeccably dressed in a pair of my gym shorts. "I need to get back and check on my place," Marcus said, once we had everything arranged. "You going to be okay with all this?" He gestured vaguely toward my family, who were still moving around in a daze. "I'll manage," I assured him. "Marcus, I can't thank you enough." He waved it off. "That's what neighbors do. Besides, you'd have done the same for me." He paused at the door. "For what it's worth, they're seeing it now, what you've built here. It's a good home, Phil." After Marcus left, I found myself in the kitchen, surrounded by all the food I'd prepared for the BBQ that never happened. It seemed fitting in a twisted way that my family would end up eating it after all, just under completely different circumstances than I'd planned. I reheated the brisket and set out the sides that were still good. I made fresh coffee and found the emergency bottle of whiskey for those who needed something stronger. As I worked, I was aware of my family, watching me, seeing me move confidently through my own space, taking charge in a crisis. When everything was ready, I called everyone to the dining room. They gathered around the table I'd so carefully set earlier that day, now hastily reorganized for this impromptu midnight meal. "This is delicious, Phil," my mother said after taking a bite of brisket. "You made this yourself?" "Dad's recipe," I replied, glancing at my father, who was studying his plate intently. "You nailed it," Tyler said, already on his second helping. "Seriously, bro." Madison was quieter, helping her children eat while occasionally looking around at my house with new eyes. "Your place is really nice, Phil," she finally said. "You've done amazing things with it." I accepted the compliment, with a nod, not trusting myself to respond, without letting bitterness seep into my voice. This wasn't the time for confrontation. These people had just lost homes, cars, possessions. Bringing up the BBQ now would be petty. After everyone had eaten, I distributed blankets and pillows and showed people to their sleeping areas. The children fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the ordeal. The adults soon followed the stress of the day, catching up with them. I found myself unable to sleep, instead, sitting at my kitchen counter with a cup of tea trying to process everything that had happened. I'd gone from excited host to abandoned son to emergency rescuer in the span of 12 hours. I'd seen my always-in-control father near tears. I'd watched my perfect sister in complete disarray. I'd been the steady one, the reliable one, the one with answers roles. I'd never been cast in within my family dynamic. Around 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps and looked up to see my father entering the kitchen. He looked older in that moment, his usual confident posture replaced by something more hesitant. "Can't sleep?" I asked. He shook his head, mind racing. He gestured to the kettle. "That tea still hot?" I poured him a cup and pushed it across the counter. He took it with a nod of thanks, then fell silent again. "The emergency management website says the water might not recede for 3 to 4 days," I said, filling the silence. "You're all welcome to stay as long as needed." "That's generous of you considering." He trailed off, staring into his tea. Considering what I prompted, though, I knew perfectly well what he meant. "Today, the BBQ," he looked up at me. "We should have been there, Phil. There's no excuse." I studied my father's face, searching for the defensiveness or dismissiveness I was accustomed to, but finding only genuine regret. "No," I agreed quietly. "There isn't an excuse." The simple acknowledgement hung between us, neither of us rushing to fill the silence that followed. Finally, my father spoke again. "When the water started rising, you were the first person I thought to call. Not because you were on high ground, but because you're the one who always figures things out. The reliable one." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Ironic, isn't it? We don't show up for your big day, but the minute we're in trouble, we expect you to be there." "And I pointed out. "You were," he agreed. "That says something about you that I've probably never properly acknowledged." We talked for another hour, as the house slept around us. It wasn't a complete reckoning. Too many years of family dynamics couldn't be unpacked in one late-night conversation, but it was a start. A crack in the foundation of how we'd always related to each other. As dawn broke, I finally felt tired enough to sleep. I made up a spot for myself on the living room floor, surrounded by my family and my home at last. It wasn't the housewarming I'd planned, but perhaps it was the one we needed. The next morning, I woke to the sounds of movement in my kitchen. For a disorienting moment, I forgot the events of the previous day. Then it all came flooding back: the abandoned BBQ, the flood, the rescue, the late-night conversation with my father. I got up from my makeshift bed on the living room floor and found most of my family already awake, clustered around my kitchen island. My mother was making coffee. Tyler was helping Atticus and Penelope with breakfast. Madison was checking her phone for news updates. My father stood by the window looking out at the clear sky that belied the disaster across town. "Morning," I said, drawing their attention. "Everyone sleep okay?" There were murmurs of assent, though no one had likely slept well given the circumstances. I poured myself coffee and leaned against the counter, observing my family in my space. It was surreal. "The news says the water's still rising in some areas," Madison reported, scrolling through her phone. "They're saying it could be Wednesday before we can even assess the damage. You're all welcome to stay, as long as you need." I repeated my offer from the night before. "That's very kind of you, Philip," my mother said, patting my arm affectionately. My father cleared his throat. "Phil, about yesterday." "Dad, it's fine," I interrupted, not wanting to have this conversation in front of everyone. "We have bigger concerns right now." "No, it's not fine," he insisted, turning to face the room. "We all owe Phil an apology. A significant one." The kitchen fell silent. Tyler stopped mid-bite. Madison set down her phone. My mother looked anxiously between my father and me. "We were all supposed to be here yesterday," my father continued, "for Phil's housewarming BBQ, an important day for him, and none of us showed up. Not one of us." Madison had the grace to look ashamed. "Phil, I'm so sorry. When Bradford surprised me with the car, I got caught up in the moment." "We all did," Tyler added. "It was a crappy thing to do." And not the first time I found myself saying the words coming out before I could stop them. This is a pattern with our family. Has been for as long as I can remember. What do you mean? My mother asked, her voice small. Now that I'd started, I couldn't stop. Years of feeling invisible came pouring out. Madison gets a new car, and everyone drops everything to celebrate. Tyler has a game, and the whole family shows up with custom t-shirts. I buy my first house, something I worked years for, saved every penny for, and I don't even rate a text message saying you can't make it. The silence that followed was deafening. I've always been the afterthought in this family. I continued, my voice steady, despite the emotion behind it. The middle child, who's easy to forget. I stopped expecting big celebrations years ago. But basic courtesy, showing up when you say you will, that's not too much to ask. Madison stepped forward, her usual confidence subdued. You're right. I've been selfish. Yesterday was inexcusable, but it's part of a bigger problem. She glanced at our parents. We've all been guilty of it. I didn't think it bothered you, Tyler said. You never said anything. Would it have mattered if I challenged him? Or would that have been dismissed as middle child syndrome, or me being too sensitive? Tyler had no answer for that. My father, who rarely admitted fault, surprised me by saying, I've failed you as a father, Phil. I've measured success by the wrong metrics. I've celebrated the flashy achievements and overlooked the quiet, steady ones. Your house, he gestured around us. This is remarkable. Not just the house itself, but what it represents. You did this on your own, with no help from anyone. That's worth 10 times more than any car or trophy. My mother was quietly crying. I should have stood up for you more, she said. I saw what was happening, but I went along with it. I'm so sorry, Philip. Madison, always quick to defend herself, was uncharacteristically reflective. I've been caught up in appearances for so long. The perfect house, perfect kids, perfect life for Instagram. Yesterday, when my new car got damaged, my first thought was about how I'd have to postpone posting about it. How shallow is that? We take you for granted, Tyler admitted. Because you're always there, always reliable. You never make waves. But that doesn't make you less important. I took a deep breath, trying to process this unexpected family reckoning. I don't want pity or sudden special treatment. I just want to be seen. To have my milestones matter too. To not always be the one who understands when everyone else is too busy. That's not too much to ask, my father acknowledged. Not even close. Things need to change, I said firmly. I'm not going to keep accepting being the family afterthought. I love you all, but I deserve better than what happened yesterday. You do, my father agreed. And things will change. Starting now. The conversation continued as family members took turns acknowledging past instances where they'd overlooked me and promising specific changes for the future. There were tears, uncomfortable silences, and moments of genuine connection that felt new and fragile. It wasn't perfect. Madison still tried to justify her actions a couple of times before catching herself. My father occasionally slipped into his lecturing tone, but there was an authenticity to the discussion that gave me hope. What struck me most was how the family power dynamic had subtly shifted. In my home, standing my ground about my worth, I was no longer the overlooked middle child. I was Phil, homeowner, rescuer, truth teller. For perhaps the first time, my family was seeing me clearly. As the conversation wound down, my father said something that stayed with me. It shouldn't have taken a natural disaster for us to see what was right in front of us all along. But I'm grateful it did before we lost something more valuable than houses or cars. Madison, in a moment of rare humility, added, When you didn't answer our calls at first last night, I was terrified that we'd finally pushed you away for good, and I realized how much that would devastate me. I considered not answering, I admitted, for about 30 seconds. But that's not who I am. Thank God for that, my mother said softly, and thank God for who you are, Philip. As the day progressed, and we monitored news of the flood, the conversation naturally shifted to practical matters, insurance claims, temporary housing, salvaging possessions. But something fundamental had changed. Family members sought my input, valued my suggestions, and treated me with a new respect that felt both foreign and long overdue. That evening, as we all pitched in to prepare dinner, I caught my father watching me, with an expression I'd rarely seen directed my way pride. What I asked when our eyes met. Just thinking, he replied that I have a lot of catching up to do when it comes to appreciating my middle child. For the first time in my memory, I felt truly seen by my family. It wasn't just because I'd rescued them, or because they were in my home. It was because, finally, painfully, honestly, we'd broken through the family patterns that had kept me in the shadows for so long. 1 month after the flood, I hosted another BBQ in my backyard. The weather was perfect, 75 degrees with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of grilling meat and fresh-cut grass. This time, my family didn't just show up. They arrived an hour early to help set up. My father manned the grill wearing an apron I'd given him that read Grill Sergeant. He'd called me 3 times the previous week to discuss the menu and marinade options. My mother arranged flowers she'd brought specifically for the occasion, and kept telling neighbors who stopped by, "This is my son, Philip's house. Isn't it wonderful what he's done with it?" Madison had left her usual designer outfit at home, instead wearing jeans and a casual shirt. She'd brought homemade cupcakes with little house-shaped toppers. "I made them myself," she told me proudly. Pinterest fail right, but I tried. They weren't perfect, but the effort meant more than she could know. Tyler brought a housewarming gift, a custom welcome mat with my name and house number. "Thought it would make it official," he said with a grin. After everyone had eaten, my father clinked his glass to get everyone's attention. "I'd like to make a toast," he announced. The backyard fell quiet. "To Phil," he said, raising his glass. "Not just for this beautiful home he's created through his own hard work and determination, but for being the kind of man who shows up when it matters most. I couldn't be prouder of the person you are, son." Tears pricked my eyes as glasses were raised around the yard. "To Phil," everyone echoed. Later, as some guests played yard games and others chatted in groups, my mother pulled out a photo album I'd never seen before. "I've been putting this together," she explained as she sat beside me. "I realize we don't celebrate your milestones enough." She opened the album to reveal photos of me throughout the years, winning the 5th grade spelling bee, graduating high school, receiving my first IT certification. Many were events I thought no one had photographed or remembered. "You kept all these?" I asked, amazed. "Of course I did," she said, squeezing my hand. "I've always been proud of you, Philip. I just didn't show it enough." Madison joined us, peering over my shoulder at the photos. "Oh my God, is that Phil at his coding competition? I remember that. You built that program that calculated optimal delivery routes, right?" I was surprised she remembered. "Yeah, won 3rd place." "That was impressive," she said sincerely. "I never told you, but I bragged about you to my friends after that. My brother, the computer genius, I called you." Throughout the afternoon, I noticed more small but significant changes. Tyler asked detailed questions about my career path, admitting he was feeling lost about his own future. "You've always been so focused," he said. "How did you know what you wanted to do?" My father, who had once dismissed my career choice, now introduced me to his friend with pride. "Phil's a senior developer now. Designs systems for major financial institutions. Self-taught a lot of it, too." Even the extended family made efforts. Aunt Patricia brought a plant for my garden. Uncle Robert asked for a full tour of the house, complimenting the renovations I'd done myself. It wasn't just about the attention, though, that felt validating. It was about being seen for who I really was. Not just the reliable middle child, but a person with achievements, dreams, and value. The relationship with my neighbor Marcus had deepened into a true friendship. He'd become a regular visitor, often stopping by with tools or advice for my ongoing home projects. Today, he'd brought his sister Rachel to the BBQ. We'd hit it off immediately, finding common ground in our love of old sci-fi movies and hiking. Her laugh and quick wit had me looking for reasons to continue our conversation throughout the day. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, my family helped clean up without being asked, another small but meaningful change. "We should do this monthly," my mother suggested. "Family gatherings at different houses. Phil's, ours, Madison's, once the renovations are done." "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. Later, after everyone had gone, I sat alone on my deck, watching the sunset. The past month had brought changes I never expected, not just in my relationships, but in how I saw myself. I no longer felt like I needed my family's validation to know my worth, yet paradoxically, now that I'd stopped desperately seeking it, it was freely given. The flood had washed away more than physical possessions. It had cleared out old patterns and expectations, creating space for new, healthier connections. My family wasn't perfect. There were still moments when old habits emerged, but there was a genuine effort to change, to see each other more clearly. I'd learned that sometimes being overlooked allows you to develop strengths others don't see coming. My self-reliance, problem-solving abilities, and quiet determination had been forged in the shadow of my siblings' spotlight. Those qualities had not only helped me build this home, but had ultimately been what my family needed most in their moment of crisis. I'd also learned that speaking your truth while uncomfortable is sometimes the only way to break through entrenched family dynamics. Decades of feeling invisible hadn't changed until I finally said I deserved to be seen. Most importantly, I discovered that true contentment comes not from external validation, but from living authentically. My house wasn't the largest or most impressive in the family, but it was mine, built through my efforts, reflecting my values, standing solid on its foundation, just as I now stood more confidently in my place within the family. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. The journey hadn't been easy, and there would surely be challenges ahead, but something fundamental had shifted, both within me and within my family system. Sometimes the hardest storms bring the most necessary changes. Sometimes being passed over for years makes the moment of recognition all the sweeter. And sometimes finding your voice is the first step to finding your peace. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Or maybe you've been the one who didn't see someone important until it was almost too late. Share your experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you navigated family dynamics and what lessons you learned along the way. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and hit that share button if you know someone who might need to hear this message today. Remember, sometimes the person who seems the most forgotten is actually the family's hidden strength. Thank you for listening, and I hope your journey brings you the recognition and peace you deserve.